Well, that certainly was not the start to the season that Detroit Lions fans were hoping for as the Lions get their teeth kicked in by the Green Bay Packers in week one. And above all else, we also had our teeth kicked in by some audio difficulties last week, which prevented us from making a show. So you haven't heard our voices in 2 weeks. Welcome back to the Payne and Drain show after a bit of an unexpected absence over the last week here going into week one. And obviously, week one did not go as planned. My name is Zach Payne. I'm one half of the show, and I'm joined, as always, by my co host, Alex Drain. Alex, how are we doing a couple days out from a brutal week one loss?
Well, it was an interesting kind of weekend there for people in the state of Michigan. You either got a great high and then a horrible low. If you were a Michigan State fan, MSU pulled off a very exciting double overtime win over the Boston College Eagles on Saturday night at Spartan Stadium. On the other hand, if you were a Michigan Wolverines fan, it was basically two punches to the face in back-to-back days in very similar fashion. So, I obviously was on the second half of that experience, but it is what it is. I will say that compared to Michigan, I am less concerned about the Lions. There are some things that they've got to deal with. They're going to have to work through, and we'll get into that. But I don't think it's five alarm fire, then the season's finished sort of thing. So I think things are correctable within reason, and not to say that Michigan isn't, but I think there are some deeper issues potentially rearing their head with Michigan, where the Lions. It's probably some personnel things, probably some early season issues, which we talked about last week in the show that never made it to publication. So
Yeah, it's kind of funny because ironically, a lot of the things we talked about in that scrapped show were actually kind of bang on in terms of our fears and what could have possibly gone wrong. So it's kind of a shame that we don't get to properly gloat about those things. So to start off with, we will recap, thankfully, just two injuries off the top, a lot lighter than we got used to down the stretch last year. So to start off, Jamarco Jones out for the season after being a surprise. He was a surprise keep on the 53-man roster over Dan Skipper, but he has an ankle injury. He was placed on the season-ending injured reserve list. And as a result, the Lions signed an offensive lineman from Cincinnati. I believe his name was Dylan Cochran or something like that. A just on the practice squad, another tackle for depth. And then a more significant injury, Terrion Arnold, in terms of significant in terms of the player it's happening to, but a lot less severe in the sense that it's a groin injury that Terrion himself said he could possibly play through it, but it gave him enough discomfort that they pulled him from the game in Green Bay after a quarter. And Dan Campbell doesn't seem worried about it long term, but he did float the possibility that maybe Terrion will not make it to the game against Chicago on Sunday. So something to monitor, just practice reports as we go throughout the week here. But as far as escaping a game unscathed injury wise, I think the Lions did okay here.
yeah, the Terry on one, I think probably score effects played a bit of a role. The Lions were in some early trouble, and he was on the downside of some of that, particularly a deep shot and then the touchdown. Touchdown he had less to do with, which we'll get into, but he had a couple bad plays. They fell behind the Packers quite a bit, and I think it's probably just rest him. And if I remember correctly, didn't he have a groin injury or was it a hamstring officially? But he was out of camp for a little bit with something that I recall being like in that neighborhood. So I wonder if that kind of played a bit of a factor.
Yeah, I think it was hamstring, but it was some sort of like soft tissue
Yeah.
hot upper leg injury. So certainly in the same neighborhood as whatever he's was dealing with previously.
Which isn't ideal, but at least it's not a bone break or something where he's going to be out a month.
Yeah, so if he plays on Sunday, he plays. If not, Ruckusin will come to the game. I know that a few people might roll their eyes given what happened on Sunday immediately after Ruckusin came into the game that we'll get into in a little bit. But to start off, we at last season we always started off offense then defense, but I actually want to change gears a little bit because this will be a quicker topic to talk about. But it's something we did mention a few times throughout the preseason. The special teams uncharacteristically bad to start the season for the Detroit Lions. And I imagine Dave Phipp is ripping whatever little hair he has out of his head.
Yeah, I would be a little bit worried if I were Dave Phipp. Just not sitting on flames, but maybe a little embers. Just a slight the seat warmer has been turned on just as you got in the car, and it'll take 20 minutes for it to heat up. But special teams coordinator is one of those things you can change on your staff mid-season and if something needs to happen. But like this team can't be being submarined by like its special teams. This has to get fixed. And it was an issue in the preseason. They were sloppy there. And it's strange because it hasn't been an issue really in the Campbell era. The Lions have generally had pretty good special teams. And I had a line in my season preview on my Substack where I was talking about if the Lions have a pretty good offense and a pretty good defense, they should be a pretty good team and make the playoffs. And I referenced, if you're familiar with the 2010 San Diego Chargers, the greatest team to never make the playoffs, who had the number one offense, number one defense, lost a gazillion close games because they had the worst special teams unit like of all time. And I had a little footnote being like, well, this shouldn't be an issue. Lions have generally had strong special teams, and they have a great punter. They have a pretty good kicker. Khalif Raymond is a good punt returner. This shouldn't be a problem. And yet it was an issue in this game. It was just a pretty sloppy performances. The coverage units, the kick return units with sailors back there, they didn't get a lot out of those. They did get screwed by a really poor penalty call where Nance and Romo, probably the only time in the game they had a clue what was going on the field, caught it live that it was an offsides. The Packers jumped, and was it Craig Reynolds
I
who,
think so, yeah.
yeah, who
Just
pointed at it
points.
and yeah, and then they end up getting Craig Reynolds for a false start when he reacted to the guy jumping off sides. And it's clear as day on the all 22 clip that's been online. We didn't get a replay on it because we needed to show Micah Parsons sitting on the bench. That ended up costing the Lions 30 yards of field position because it was a great punt and they had pinned him. But on the other hand, it shouldn't be 30 yards of difference. That's a 5 yard penalty. You shouldn't have, when you have to do it again, the breakdown. They had a little shorter punt, not a good coverage snap, and it ends up really costing them. So that stuff's just gotta be fixed. Like you
Yeah,
just
and
can't be costing, especially with this schedule, right? Like we're gonna play Baltimore, gonna play Cincinnati, who's a decent team. The Bucks, like there's so many good teams on this schedule. The margins in the NFL are so thin. You cannot be losing hidden yards here and there throughout the game because you can't get basic coverages down on special teams.
yeah, and I mean the fact that everything went wrong on the redo of that punt where Jack Fox
Yep.
loses 20 yards on the punt because like for just I don't know if he put too much air on it, just didn't get enough on it. Like very weird. Fox was getting outplayed by is it Whelan? That the Packers punter's name?
Yes. Yeah.
Who he had a couple of bombs in this one. There was one at the end of the half where Khalif Raymond ended up like trying to just run east-west a bunch and ended up not only getting like no extra yards, but also burned like 13 seconds of clock and resulted in the Lions just taking a knee to end the half. Sailors was fine. I still do not love the idea of Grant Stewart being a kick returner. I would imagine that Sione Vaki, when he's healthy, would be a factor there, but I'm stunned that the returner, that Craig Reynolds isn't a returner as he has been for the past couple of seasons. Just very, very bizarre. I'm a lot more concerned about the kick coverage though than the returns. Like, okay, you can return the ball to the 25-30. We know Khalif Raymond is a good punt returner. He just had a weird game. But the coverage, I'm a lot more concerned about because the Packers were routinely getting 15, 20 yards on these returns. And that can't happen. When you start every drive at the 40 or 50 instead of the 25 or 30, that is a huge difference. Only needing basically one first down to get into field goal range. For as good as the Lions are defending the run, we know they're problems defending the pass that we'll talk about later. So, like you said, the margins are just so thin, and I want to flag that in this show so that if we have to revisit it, we can be like, well, we've been concerned about this for like consider the concern level. I put out like a 4 or 5 out of 10 at the like, which for week one is pretty high.
It's climbing. They need a crisp showing in that department this weekend to kind of settle our nerves down.
Yep. So switching over to another department that was even worse, the offense, which obviously I think if I had to summarize this game for anyone, the best way I could sum it up is all the narratives that were written about both of these teams coming into week one were reinforced to an extreme degree. Everyone all offseason, oh, the Lions are going to regress. Oh, the Lions offense is going to be terrible without Ben Johnson and Frank Ragnow. Well, that certainly seemed to be the case against the Packers on Sunday. Now, obviously, caveat, the Packers are a good defense. But the Lions did not look prepared to play this Packers defense. They looked like they came in with a general game plan and they were focusing on doing things right themselves. Whereas Green Bay came into this game with a specific game plan for how they wanted to play against the Lions. And it was clear as day from the first snap that this was not going to be a fun offensive day. The interior of the offensive line, I think we should just start there. Christian Mahogany, Graham Glasgow, Tate Ratledge are getting a lot of the spotlight from an analyst standpoint because, quite frankly, they were bad, especially in the pass blocking department. Tate Ratledge, not good as a pass blocker in his NFL debut. Christian Mahogany got beat a couple of times, and Glasgow was fine. But when you're filling the shoes of an all-time, like probably the best center the Lions will ever have, definitely stands out a lot more.
Yeah, the interior offensive line, I think, honestly, when you talk about the narratives, that didn't get enough attention. I think from at least national people, we were more cognizant of it, but there was just so much focus on Ben Johnson, and this is just kind of a general thing, but I really hate the way that sort of collectively on the internet football discussion has just become like a talk about coordinators, like all the time, right? Like that, we'll get to NFC North stuff in the next, in the last segment, but like that was just all it was last night during that Monday Night Football game is, oh, Caleb Williams with Ben Johnson, Jared Goff without Ben Johnson. No, actually, no, Caleb, blah, blah. And it's just like sometimes there are still players on the field. The players still determine things. And in this game, it was really the story of the interior offensive line because I think with the pass game, Jeremy Reisman had the good, um, like the target map, I think it was from the games last year against the Packers. And you could see that Goff in those two games dinked and dunked quite a bit too, a lot like this game. The difference is when you're dinking and dunking alongside a dominant running game, you can have a lot more success. And in this game, the Lions had very little running game, and then dinking and dunking alongside that doesn't really get you anywhere. And that's kind of the story of this game a little bit. And it started up front. Ratledge, I thought, was okay as a run blocker, but
Mhm.
couldn't pass block whatsoever in this
No.
game, really. That was quite bad. And then Glasgow wasn't really great in either phase to me. And you could see some of the issues with his just like agility when he was asked to get to the second level. And the Packers linebackers played great. They had a really good game. They were aggressive. They were downhill. They were fast. And he just couldn't get to them really. And he couldn't reach them, couldn't get a hand on them. And then, Mahogany, I thought was a little better in the pass pro. Not as good on the ground, and just altogether there was missed assignments, which Campbell talked about, and it just looked kind of like a guy that hasn't played center that much over the last few years and might be in decline between two essentially rookies, one in his third start, one in his first start, and um, some people I think probably underestimated the extent to which it could look like that early in a season.
Yeah, like I think we mentioned that there'll be growing pains. I don't think we emphasized that it could be this brutal in week
Yeah.
one. The one screenshot going around of when the Lions got backed up to their goal line, and it was like second and or third and like 16 or something from the two. And Tate Ratledge, I'm assuming there's the only explanation I have for this play is Ratledge just got like thought his job was to double Micah Parsons for some reason because he just abandons the nose tackle in the middle of the field and Glasgow goes to help out Mahogany on the left, which results in David Montgomery staring down a 350-pound defensive lineman and just having to avoid a safety. It is one of the, I'm not gonna lie, it is one of the funniest offensive line missed assignments I've seen where it's just like, all right, let's just avoid this guy like he's the plague. Mahogany also had the one play where Lucas Van Ness just ran over him
Yeah.
to get a sack. That was brutal. So just a lot of like the growing pains of this one were very evident. And the problem is, like you said, when the run game isn't going, the offense isn't going. And Jahmyr Gibbs, that had to be the worst rushing performance of his career so far, and it wasn't even entirely his fault. When I was watching the tape back, I was like, you're hitting all the right gaps. The problem is the gaps that last year you like if you had got those gaps last year, you would have gotten 3 yards downfield before you got touched. Whereas in this game, he was getting hit at the line of scrimmage or behind it, which was the biggest problem. Is the Lions were not getting enough push up front to open up holes. David Montgomery did a little bit better as far as success rate, but only because he's better at dragging defenders forward for extra yards. It just was not a banner day for the run blocking in the slightest.
Yeah, I mean, there was that stat online about the number of times Lions guys were hit behind the line of scrimmage, and it was the highest rate, I think, of the Campbell tenure. And obviously, that kind of game is going to be a David Montgomery game relative to a Jahmyr Gibbs game. Gibbs had the one play where he bounced it outside on like the second drive, and he gets like 10 yards. That was really the only thing I had on him that was particularly notable. He has the really bad play on
Oh,
the goal
yeah,
to
the
ghost
minus
situation.
minus 6 yards.
Second and goal, it goes backwards when there's really nothing there. What I did find that I was a little bit encouraged by on some of those plays, and that one was included, where they weren't a complete disaster. It wasn't outside of some of the misassignment stuff where it's a few guys together with it, but generally it was just like we're one guy away. And you look at that second and goal where Gibbs gets TFL'd, and I looked at it and I thought Glasgow just couldn't get to the linebacker. And if you get to the linebacker, there's a hole for Gibbs to get like 5, 6, 7 yards. And it wasn't like the line of scrimmage is a war zone and it's just a mosh pit. You know, a number of these plays, they did get 3, 4 good blocks on a play, and then there's just one guy where he doesn't get the block, and then the linebacker's right there. And then the play's over. And so if you're one guy away, I think over the course of the season, especially with the younger guards, they get more reps, get a little stronger, get a little more familiar, and maybe you can clean some of those up and start turning negative plays into chunk runs. And all of a sudden, if you do that and you go from second and 11 or second and goal from around the 11-ish to third and goal from the 5, that's a totally different game, completely different. So there's just some things they need to deal with. I fear that Glasgow over the course of the year might not be fixable, unfortunately, but the younger guards, I think there's definitely room there.
The saving grace with that though is if that's the case, it is easier to hide a bad center than it is
Yeah.
to hide a bad guard. Like guards are pulling all the time. Guards are usually the ones that are tasked with getting to the second level. So you can kind of make like, and the center is the like you can help him out with double teams a lot more. So you can kind of game plan around a bad center a lot more than you can game plan around a bad guard. I will say, like, I think we talked about this in the final roster breakdown where I think Tate Ratledge is just going to be a right guard. I'm not going to be shocked at all if we get to the draft next spring and it's the Lions are looking at a center with their first pick, or in free agency, the Lions are looking at paying money for a center because they just need one, plain and simple. And I don't think I'd rather have Tate Ratledge be a super awesome guard in the future rather than try to fit a square peg into a round hole and try to force him to be a center. If he could do it, great, but I'd rather just let him be good at his natural position.
Yeah, I think that's probably the long-term plan. I had this thought of I don't know, did we ever hear if the Lions knew when Ragnow was retiring, like behind the scenes? It sounded
Not
like they didn't.
specifically. It was, I think the way that I saw it phrased, but like as it was happening was the Lions were aware he was thinking about it, but he hadn't made any firm decision until after the draft. So they kind of went into the draft being like, okay, this might happen, so let's maybe be a little bit more cognizant. But
Yeah, because I think looking back, it would have just been nice to get one of Ragnow and Zeitler back. Right? You didn't need both. Yeah, obviously that would have been incredible, whatever. But if you had one back, I think the picture changes a decent bit. Because like if you have Zeitler next to Glasgow and you have Mahogany and Ratledge fighting for a spot or something, then you've just still got a pillar on that side, right? And if you have no Zeitler but Ragnow's back, then he can handle that part, and then you can get the young guards going, and they're going to fight Glasgow for a spot. Just one of those two dudes would have really helped, but unfortunately, the predicament of losing both a Pro Bowler and an All Pro and
mm,
replacing them essentially with rookies, yeah, There was going to be drop off, and that probably was underestimated. But also, the Packers are probably really quite strong, and they were clearly fired up to play this game. We saw
Hmm.
Mahogany play last year against the Commanders in the playoff game. That's a team that at that time did not have a very good defensive tackle situation, and he did very well in that game. So I think Mahogany's capable of better. We've seen it. I think this might just be a situation where you could look back and say, yeah, that was one of the better defenses they played all year, and they just weren't quite ready for it.
Yeah, and again, the Packers were so fired up for this game. The Lions had, or the Packers hadn't beat the Lions at home since 2021, and that was one of the least talented rosters in recent NFL history that the Lions had that year. So
And the Lions
the
hung in that game. Remember that one,
for
the
a
Monday
while,
night
yeah.
game? Yeah.
It ended like 35-17, but for the first like three quarters of that game, it was relatively close. Goff had I remember that game, like on the first drive, like he finally realized, oh, I have a good offensive line, and then he was able to unleash a bomb to Quintez Cephas. Don't ask why I remember that so specifically, but that was a fun game and great throw to Hawkinson in the end zone too. Getting back to this game though, the Packers early on, the Packers emphasized stopping the run. A lot of the loaded boxes the Lions saw were early in this game, and then the Packers bailed out as the game progressed, and the Lions had to throw more, which is to be expected. And there was a lot of like these 5-2 fronts in the first half, a lot of eight guys in the box, and even when they didn't necessarily have like these heavier fronts, their corners were playing a lot closer to the line. They weren't pressing, but they always had eight or nine guys within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. They made sure that anytime the Lions were running or running a screen, that they would have plenty of bodies to go snuff it out. And as you mentioned earlier, Quay Walker and Edrin Cooper, unbelievable game from those two. Cooper especially guarding Gibbs in the pass game. Walker was fantastic at sorting through blocks on some of those screens. It's like unfortunately one of the better games I've seen Quay Walker play in his career, and I liked it a lot better when he sucked.
Yeah, he didn't do the one like brain dead play per game that he has done in the past. Unfortunately, Brian Branch did, but that's a different
Ugh.
segment.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a little bit. So the next part of this is the pass game that everyone is freaking out about. And again, in the episode that is lost to the tech demons, the Packers, like we talked about the fact that the Packers play a very like they keep everything in front of them on defense. They do not give up the big play at all. They honestly their defense is built like I talked about this in some of my videos, but the Packers love to play with the lead. They are built like the Lions to play with the lead, but the way they are built to play with the lead is a lot different than the Lions because the Lions play with the lead by running the football and keeping and like draining time offensively, and then they try to force you into these third and long situations and try to get you that way. What the Packers do, they can't run the ball as well. However, their defense is built in a lab to play with the lead because they just keep everything in front of them. They make you check it down. They make you take these super long drives. And the Lions, everything they did was playing right into Green Bay's hands. And as you mentioned, it is something that the Lions have done against Green Bay before. But when you can't run the ball, suddenly having to check it down for 5-6 yards of play and not being able to get those chunks really hurts you when you're trailing by two or three scores.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of the Michigan Ohio State thing from the past few years, which is that like if you can sit in a too high shell and keep everything in front of you and also hang in against the run with less resources devoted to that, it's a pretty hard defense to deal with. And the Packers were able to hang in against the run with, and there were some cases they loaded up the box, but on other cases, they just got good play from their tackles. They got good play from the linebackers they left in there and were able to throttle that while still leaving their safeties high. And that's a tough combination to traverse. Now, I don't have a major take about the route tree stuff that people are talking about. I haven't looked into the all 22 really to get a sense of that. I thought there were definitely some more check down opportunities that Goff missed that I could just see, but I couldn't really see what was deep and who was really to blame for that.
So I looked into it a little bit, not as intensely as some of the like Pride of Detroit guys did online that you can go see. But what I saw, especially in the first half, is a lot of the Lions clear out routes just weren't working the way that they were intending. There was one play, it was like the first third down of the game where Goff takes a snap, and is lined up as a tight end, and he's running a little out route, and his out route runs right into where Amon-Ra is running like a little sit down curl route in between zones. And it was a lot of that kind of stuff where the receivers were just a little too close together, allowing the linebackers or the corners or the safeties, whatever, to pseudo cover two guys at once. There were a few shot plays that could have been there, but anytime there was a shot available, Goff was either under pressure or he had already looked off to a different read. So I'm it's tough because on the one hand, I want to sit here and be like, "Oh, I'm not worried at all." But I mean, if Goff is under pressure, we know the interior pressure is going to be is his Achilles heel. I was a lot more worried about guys like Devonte Wyatt in this game than I was Micah Parsons, which is a crazy statement. But Devonte Wyatt was putting Tate Ratledge on skates throughout this game, and it was kind of terrifying. So when Parsons was also only credited with like two or three pressures, depending on which outlet you look at. Like he was fine in the snaps he played. He was good. He obviously got the sack that allowed Green Bay fans to really, you toot their horns and get excited. But Rashawn Gary also just bullied Taylor Decker a little bit in this game. He had the big sack to back the lines up to the goal line. Honestly, I don't think a single Lion had a good pass blocking day. So that also is a big factor as to why there wasn't more shots downfield.
Yeah, definitely. Wyatt had a really nice game. I was a fan of his at Georgia. He kind of got overshadowed by Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, but he was a good player there as well. Good pass rusher. And Parsons, I didn't think made a huge impact in this game, honestly. Like he had, obviously, the Ryans had to devote resources to him, so that makes an impact. But he didn't wreak a ton of havoc. He had a couple plays where he penetrated against Sewell, and I think it was that first series, the second series on the third down. He got a good pressure there, and it kind of knocked Goff off his rhythm. He had his moments. His sack, I don't know, man. It's like bragging about winning a race against a tortoise. Like that, any other quarterback in the league these days, that's not a sack. Like Goff is in space and with a huge lead, and Parsons only catches him because he's Jared Goff. And
Well, and also it took Parsons like 2.5 seconds to weed through the like Christian Mahogany and Taylor Decker blocking him, and then there was just so much chaos that he kind of just slipped through and emerged. But it's like if the coverage didn't hold up, like that's a coverage sack against a non-mobile
yeah,
QB.
yeah. So that one wasn't too big of a deal, but the interior pressure definitely a story. And honestly, though Decker and Sewell didn't have like bad days in pass protection, they didn't have great ones, and I was that was pretty disappointing just because you've got these younger, inexperienced guards. You need your tackles who are very highly paid, pretty highly
Mhm.
acclaimed. They need to do their job, and if we're going to have issues, then it's on the guards. But those tackles need to do their job. They need to have a better game. So that's something I'm looking forward to next week. And when pressure is a story, it's going to be a bit of an issue for Goff. Now, Goff had some mistakes too that weren't pressure related. His interception was real bad. He
Yeah.
and that's give Evan Williams credit. He knows, first of all, he knows tendency, right? It's a third down. He knows Amon-Ra running variations of that route and very common play the Lions run on third down, including previously in that game. And so he baits Goff into it. The issue when I was looking at this play is that it's just reading the quarterback's eyes. Linebackers are reading his eyes. Safeties are reading his eyes. They know Amon-Ra is the go-to. If you watch that play over, look at the top of the field, the other side. There is one or two Packers in like very soft off coverage against JMO and Laporta. Like those guys are really open because everyone just sort of is going towards where they know the ball is going to be thrown, and they baited him into it, turns it over. There wasn't pressure on that play. If the Lions could have got something on that drive, could have been a very very different game, at least game state feel, because that was their drive right at the end of the first half, right?
Yeah.
So if they get a touchdown there, it's very different at halftime, at least game state feel. So that one is on him. There was just a couple plays where he missed checkdowns, where he's looking at his deep reads. By the time he gets to the checkdown, the pressure's arrived. But there were a few ways he could have extended drives. At the end of the day, it's just not a great showing from anyone, really,
Yeah.
across the board. Laporta's the only guy besides Tesla, but that's kind of a different story.
Well, and
Who
like I mean, Tesla had a good day because he had like 3 snaps of the one target he got. He made like the most incredible catch I've seen in my life. But like, well, I'll talk about Tesla in a second. Laporta, like to start the second half, he was actually like he was going. That those were the
Yeah.
only times they were pushing the ball downfield, and Laporta was trying to get the team into it. He was like, "Come on!" Like he was trying to get amped up, get the bench into it. The thing on the interception that I do want to mention because you said there was no pressure. Well, every national pundit disagrees with you because I saw a made up stat that was Micah Parsons had one forced interception because I guess him
Let me
beating
pull that one
Sewell.
up again. Let me pull
Like,
that
so
one
that was
up
a play
again.
where he beat Sewell to the inside, and he got pressure. Like I'll give it to Parsons, he got pressure. But if Goff just isn't throwing the ball as like Parsons wasn't going to get a sack on that play because even if Goff holds on to the ball there, he just takes one step to his right and then reevaluates, and he has time. Like Sewell had that under control relatively, but Parsons was relatively in Goff's face, so maybe that's why he didn't see Evan Williams crashing down. Evan Williams also the Packers were they were rolling into cover three, and Williams was coming down from the safety spot, rolling into a robber roll, and Amon-Ra happens to be exactly where he's rolling into, so he's able to just line up Goff look, and basically just sprint into a great diving catch. Evan Williams, I think he was the highest rated defender for the Packers in this game, and I'm honestly not surprised. He was really good in this game, as was most of the Packers secondary. They were fantastic in coverage. The Packers didn't blitz. I think they blitzed like 11% of the time was the stat I saw. And the fact that they still got a decent amount of pressure is entirely because the coverage was holding up downfield and the pass rush was given 3.5 seconds to get to Goff, which whenever your coverage holds up like that, you're gonna have a good time.
Yeah, so there is pressure, but not in the way if you've watched Goff throw that a million times. Like that
Mhm.
throw they do is always just like a almost just a two-step drop and then look towards Amon-Ra and then boom, they hit it. Like the actual throw itself is not really affected by the pressure, nor really is the decision. Goff sees him, drops back, boom, I'm going there. And so I think the conclusion isn't necessarily that Goff doesn't have the right didn't scan the field because obviously that it's just sort of the way the play is, right? And we've talked about this before, wanting to see more JMO on those kinds of plays, so you're not just focusing in on Amon-Ra. So if you're someone who doesn't watch the Lions a lot, then you can say like, "Oh, Parsons forced it," but Evan Williams tees off on it in part because he knows that is a play the Lions love to run, and they pick up on the tendency, and that tendency and the decision to go to Amon-Ra right on it is sort of sealed long before pressure arrives.
Yeah, so like I'm just scrolling on Twitter right here, and like every tweet about that play is like, "Oh wow, Parsons with the forced interception because of the pressure," and I'm like, "No,
I mean,
Evan Williams just made a really good play."
yeah. It's just seeing tendency, knowing where the ball's probably going on that kind of play. Because Goff had hit Amon-Ra at least twice on third down in that game
That
previously.
drive,
Yeah,
like
like
that
they
drive was an Amon-Ra drive.
right, and
So
so they just couldn't get JMO really involved, and so that's another story just kind of to follow is can we get away from always going to Amon-Ra on third down? Like obviously Amon-Ra is a great artisan on third down. He's a great option to have, but sometimes varying it a little bit because you can just see how the way the defense is on that play. They're not really respecting the threat of Amon-Ra at the top of the field because or threat of JMO at the top of the field because they know they're going to Amon-Ra.
yeah, and I did talk about previously that both on the show that got scrapped and my own stuff that this was not set up to be a JMO game at all because of the way the
Of
Packers play
course.
defense. Like this was always going to be a tough matchup for JMO to kind of thrive. Laporta is the one that I'm looking at. Like, man, especially with how the second half started, it's like the plays are there. Like Laporta needed to be more involved with over the middle and this intermediate stuff because though like Laporta and Amon-Ra kind of thrive in some of the same areas. So if you can pull the defense, like say Amon-Ra is lined up on the right, if you could pull half the defense over to the right, you're gonna free up space for Laporta over the middle and over the left. Like you got to just get a low. And this is where the offensive coordinator stuff might come into it. But John Morton kind of has to get a little more creative with using Amon-Ra to bait out coverage and bait out these tendencies because, especially against the other NFC North teams that know the line so well, you have to take advantage of the fact that they know Amon-Ra is the guy. So I don't know what the solve is there. I will say to give grace to John Morton. this is a universal thing in the NFL. You can't really get to the creative part of your playbook until you master the simple things. Like the Lions have to work out some of the simpler things, run the ball effectively to set up some of these more fun concepts. I do think the offense will obviously get better as the season progresses. Defenses are usually ahead of the offense at this point, unless you're Buffalo or Baltimore, apparently. And so I'm not concerned about that, even if the next week and in week 3 against Baltimore, if the offense is still not humming the way we want them to. Last year, they had 20 points in regulation against the Rams and then went to overtime. They had 16 against the Bucks and then 20 against the Cardinals. Like the offense was not fantastic to start last year. It was the defense that was like keeping them in games and winning them games.
Yeah, and I mean the Lions haven't been hot starters right from the jump in the Campbell era, really. They obviously the first year took until December to win the first game, but that was a very bad roster. But the second year they lose week one, they win week two, and then they lose a bunch in a row. Third year they win week one against the Chiefs, but then they lose week two, and then against Seattle, and then the year after that they win week one, lose week two. So it's been a lot of 1-1 starts and just a little bit slow out of the gate, and then usually it starts to click a little bit. So we'll see how the trajectory goes this year, but it could take time. And that is just the reality of a new coordinator, but also the new guys up front and not putting Goff in necessarily the best situations to succeed off the bat. But as long as you make the playoffs, I'm kind of okay with it just because of where we're at with this team as a franchise. Like they've won the
Yeah.
division now twice. They've now even gotten the number one seed. It didn't help them win the Super Bowl that year. So at the end of the day, we're playing for the playoffs. And this is relevant to the defense too with the pass rush and with the injuries to guys like Ali McNeil. Like for me, it's about how does this team look health wise and performance wise going into the playoffs. And I have good faith that Morton and the interior offensive line will probably be better later in the year than they are right now.
Yep. And if you want one last piece of hope before we switch over to the defense, the Bears secondary is decimated right now, and we'll see if any of those guys are coming back next week, but the could be opportunities for the Lions receivers to play against some backups and third strings in the Bears secondary. So that'd be exciting. Switching over to the defense now, which I guess is considered the good part of this game, where, and honestly, the defense was fine. My problem was more how they performed in high leverage moments. And obviously, a big part of that is the pass defense. But we'll start with the good. The run defense, for the most part, was about as we expected, which was pretty solid, with the caveat on runs up the middle. DJ Reader was actually unreal against the run in this game. Tyleik Williams was very solid against the run. Roy Lopez, when he checked in, was pretty good as well. Any run up the middle, the Lions did a really good job defending, I thought. They got into a little bit of trouble when in the second half when they started to do more outside zones and sweeps and getting Jacobs to outside the numbers. Hutchinson had a couple. They did a good job of baiting Hutchinson and tricking him into thinking that it was something inside, which freed up the blocks to kind of seal off the edge. Davenport was again kind of at sealing the edge in this one, but for the most part, run defense held up.
Yeah, I think Reader had a solid game. The PFF was not super high on him. I think I would have graded him higher than they did. I will say with Tyleik, and you noted him, I was lower on him, so was PFF. Like I thought he had a few moments, but for me on rewatch, what really popped was Jack Campbell. That there were some plays where Tyleik would get pushed back a bit, and it didn't really matter because immediately Jack Campbell's there. And I thought Anzalone had a nice game on those interior runs that you're talking about. Like the linebackers were sticking their head in the spots in the right places. And Jack Campbell had 2 3rd-and-1 sticks in this game. He had the one that ended the drive, then they had the one on the drive where they went for it on fourth and in like a foot or whatever, and they got it.
Mm.
But he stopped him on third down on those two. He was really, really strong in run defense. Anzalone good as well. And the Lions, like, if if Tyleik or Roy Lopez or whoever, isn't super great right off the bat, you can survive that with the Lions situation. And you know why we know
Mhm.
that? Remember 2023 season. The Lions had one spot at defensive tackle that was just kind of a revolving door of randos between like Isaiah Buggs and Benito Jones, and there were some guys there. And the Lions had one of the best run defenses in the league because if you have a good one at least really good run stopping defensive tackle. And you got defensive ends who can help out, and you've got good run stopping linebackers and good run stopping safeties and Lions. They really stress that. They really think it's an important thing. They think it's an important part of their identity. And it was nice to see it kind of getting back to where we want to. And they had those drives in the second half where it wasn't quite as sharp, but as a whole, even with that last drive, the numbers were pretty solid on the ground. I was pleased with that aspect of the game, and I think the team wanted to get back to the basics there of being an elite run stopping team, and we saw a pretty good reason to think they should be able to do that this year. So that's something you can start with at least.
I'll also give props to my guy Derek Barnes, who had the
Yeah.
huge
Yep.
TFL on 3rd and 1 to early in the second half, and again playing that kind of that Sam role, the hybrid 5-2 front. He was involved in a lot of plays. Also, Terrion Arnold in the first quarter on the first couple of plays, him and Anzalone were combining for tackles. I liked the way that Terrion was crashing in from the outside there. Um, I should. We talked about DJ Reader though. I think the reason why his PFF grade was so bad is relating to an area of the defense that was not good, which is the pass rush. And I'm going to start this off with a conversation on Kelvin Shepard. Why are we asking DJ Reader to do all these stunts and twists? Why are we getting Tyleek Williams to like bounce around the edge on some of these pass rushes? And why are we dropping the edges into coverage so much? There were a lot of play calling things that just kind of irked me a little bit in this one as far as the usage of the defensive line.
Yeah, that was definitely a big topic of conversation there in the first half of the game. And I was really curious on rewatch to see what I found about the defense because I went in sort of with the feeling that I was going to find that the defense was better because of score effects, basically, right? Like after the game ended, I was like, well, the defense was better in the second half, but I went in kind of thinking it was just going to be score effects. But actually, I don't think so. I think the defense did get better, and what did improve is they got more pressure in the second half. Some of those blitz packages did get home a little bit more in the second half, which hopefully is some growth about what they were doing. Because in the first half, those blitz packages really didn't get home at all. Not whatsoever. And the thing about dropping the edges, it's not a dumb idea. It's used across football nowadays. Like the idea of drop the edge, blitz the linebacker, drop the edge, blitz the nickel, whatever. Like
Yeah.
tons of
My issue
tons
is
of
more with the
teams.
my issue is more with the volume of those plays, more
Yeah,
so than the
yeah.
concept.
And if you're gonna do them, they gotta work. Like that's the biggest thing. Is like if you're going to drop out your best pass rusher, boy, who you're scheming open needs to get home. And they weren't. And the Packers had those kind of downloaded, basically. The I thought Josh Jacobs had a phenomenal game.
As a
That's his
pass
name, right?
blocker,
Yeah, Josh
yeah.
Jacobs, right?
He
Jerry
as a pass
Jacobs was
blocker,
the
yeah,
Jerry
he was
Jacobs was the lion, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
the UDFA. But yeah, Josh Jacobs as a was picking up the blitzes all day. There were a couple of plays too where the Lions would send 6 or 7, and the Packers would have both like have two running backs on the field, and both of them would pick up guys, or the tight ends would stay in to pick someone up. The Packers just, especially in the first half, were super dialed into when the Lions were blitzing and identifying where the blitzes were coming from.
Yeah, and that was an impressive showing because the whole idea of dropping your good pass rushers and rushing someone else is it's supposed to fool them. They're supposed to think, oh, we've got to devote resources to Aiden Hutchinson or to Marcus Davenport or to Derek Barnes or whoever. And then, oh, we hit you with someone that's surprising. And there was just no element of surprise in the first half, but they got closer in the second half and a little more effective in that aspect. So that's potentially encouraging because I do think they're going to need to lean on it. Like when you talk about the volume of them, I don't hate the volume in the sense that like until Lee McNeil is back, they're probably going to need to against good pass blocking teams blitz a lot and do some funky stuff to get pressure because I just don't think this defensive front as it is right now against a team like the Packers, which we should note the Packers last year graded out as one of the best pass blocking teams in the league.
Yep.
Their line is not regarded as a great run blocking line, but it is a very strong pass blocking line. So this is again just kind of a very tough competition right off the bat. And against that kind of line, yeah, I just don't think organically they're going to get a lot of rush right now. Maybe when Wingo is back to chip in, and then you get McNeil back and Davenport up to speed, Hutchinson up to speed. Like let's be honest here too, this is Davenport's first game in almost 12 months, and it's Hutchinson's first game in 11 months. And I know there's joint practices, and the Lions are a team with famously violent, brutal practices, but you still can't really simulate a real game. So it might take them a little bit of time to get their feet under them. And during that period, you're going to have to try to find ways to get some pressures. And so Shepard tried some things; they didn't really work, but he's also a first-time coordinator, so maybe he'll get a hang of what really works as the year goes along.
Yeah, and I think blitzing in general is fine. I just if Hutchinson's dropping into coverage more than 2 or 3 times a game, I think
Sure.
we're overdoing it a little bit. But I like the idea of trying to disguise your pressure and like it's all well and good. It's just the Packers were just doing a great job picking it up in that sense. But we'll see how because yeah, the Lions are going to have to blitz a lot because they also famously don't believe in using a spy or containing much like so going against Caleb Williams, who we'll talk about later, and the whole evading pressure thing. If you're going to send heat, you better get the quarterback on the ground if that's going to happen because the coverage, which is also a hot button topic, and I know you have some strong feelings about this specifically because the Lions are a very man-heavy team, and every time there was a key situation, the Packers knew exactly what the Lions were doing, and they knew exactly how to exploit it. We talked about the two plays on Terrion, the one to Dobbs, and then the very next play to Jaden Reed on the little pick route. The Packers just, whenever it came down to it, they had their man beaters lined up and they worked for the most part. I think the reason the Lions defense also did better in the second half, the Packers didn't really throw in the second half. That's also a major factor that helped Detroit kind of keep the game relatively close. I'll use that term loosely because it wasn't very close, but the defense held their own mainly because the Packers didn't just throw the ball a bunch.
Yeah, I there was I was talking with someone the other day who was asking me about Aaron Glenn and my thoughts on him, and sort of saying you weren't the biggest Aaron Glenn fan, and I was like, yeah, but I actually now have kind of changed my opinion on Aaron Glenn because my biggest complaint was about the base man stuff. And then as soon as Aaron Glenn leaves, Dan is in front of the mic being like, whoever I hire next, I want to stay being a base man team. And I'm like, well, Aaron Glenn's off the hook to me because like that's clearly a directive from the head coach. And it's just kind of my complaint with it. I just wonder, it's just one of those things where the Lions are a base man team in a league where the too high shell has been all the rage. And we saw the Eagles have a great defense win the Super Bowl with it. The Ravens have had a lot of success with the amoeba and the multiple and all that stuff. And now you've got a Ravens disciple and Jesse Minner, who's the DC in Los Angeles with the Chargers, and they've already built a very strong defense. He's only been there a little over a year doing kind of the same thing. And then you've got Halfley in this game with the Packers. And it just kind of feels like that's the way the league is. And the Lions remain a team that's throwing um, their corners out there kind of on islands and have done it with only so-so corners over the course of the Campbell era. That Arnold has had his ups and downs, and obviously Cam Sutton wasn't very good. And we've had Kindle Vildor at points, and like it just we haven't like if you're going to be a base man team, like you got Darrelle Revis out there, like great, right? You got like Pat Surtain or whatever. That's one thing, but I just wonder if it's the best approach in the league today. But it's their approach, and it is what it is. It's going to mean that sometimes you get hit with that pick play that got the touchdown because that's man beater 101 stuff with the little rub route. And when you've only got a single high safety, sometimes you're going to get burned over the top. And the Packers ran a great play there. They got Kirby to come down on the deep cross, and then they hit Arnold over the top. And I actually thought Arnold had an okay day. He was getting clowned online. It wasn't
Oh
like
man,
it
the
wasn't the
reactions are
start.
so extreme.
It wasn't the start of a breakout performance necessarily, but there were a couple snaps where I was like, yeah, that's good coverage. Forced a PBU, but then he got on a big play, and unfortunately, that kind of gives a lot back in that sense. So I thought Reed actually had the worst day of the two. He had some issues in this game,
Had some
including one,
miscommunications.
just that one miscommunication. That was the third and one of the early third and quite long. So maybe it was medium. I don't remember what down exactly it was, but it was a third down. And Jeremy Reisman had the clip online just showing how the Lions miscommunicated there. They had two guys cover the same one, including Reed. And then that was the play that really started everyone freaking out about the dropping into coverage thing because they were like, why is the guy across the middle being covered by Marcus Davenport? Whose idea was this? And it's like, well, that wasn't that wasn't the idea. It just got hit with it. So maybe it may take Reed a little bit of time to settle in, just getting to know his new teammates and the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, It'll take time to gel. I think the theme of this for the Lions is it's week one. The team's going to get better, but it's it's kind of a similar conversation that we had last year after week one because we were like, man, there were a lot of things in this game that we did not like. The difference was they won that game, so it's a lot
Yep.
easier to not overreact when you win in week one. Whereas the score gets out of hand, the offense doesn't do anything, you get killed. And honestly, this game kind of looked a little too similar to some of the preseason games that we were like, this sucks. But end of the day, the team's gonna get better. And the Packers are probably going to like they're the favorites in the NFC North. That definitely got reinforced. The Packers are going to be one of the better teams in the NFC, one of the three or four best in the NFC. So they're a good team. We'll see what happens against lesser opponents. That being said, suddenly the Lions are in a position where this game against Chicago, you kind of need to win it because I'm not looking forward to Baltimore in week three. And if you lose to Chicago and you're staring at that Baltimore game being like, "Oh, we're 0-2 and we have to go into Baltimore," things might get a little anxious real quick.
Yeah, I mean the Packers, we want to dunk on them and blah blah blah, but this was an impressive statement, and I think that they are pretty clearly one of the best teams in the NFC. And I think the Lions would like to believe they are still in that category. We'll see if they can prove themselves. But the Packers right now, who on the schedule is definitely better than the Packers? Probably the Eagles, maybe. I mean, their defense
In
looked
the
bad in that
NFC
first
or just
game.
in general?
Just on the Lions' schedule, like the Chiefs,
So
maybe Eagles, maybe.
Ravens, Eagles, and maybe Chiefs.
Yeah, I mean it's a short list, so this was a tough test right away, and it was on the road. So um, we'll see how the year goes along. But what I will say is, if their run defense is back to where we want it to be, if you can get teams consistently into third and longs, um, you'll have some success, and it'll start to come. They just need a little more pass rush, and that's going to be a bit of an issue. I don't really know how much Zadarius Smith would have helped because I don't know how much he has left in the tank at this point. Obviously, would have been better than nothing, but the reality is, until you get Aleem McNeil back, it could be a little bit, especially because it's not just Aleem, but you lose Levi Onwuzurike, right? Like this is
Yeah, there's
where,
just no pass rush on the interior.
yeah, there's no pass rush on the interior, and until Davenport's kind of going, it could be a little dicey. But again, the Packers are a great pass block team, so it may just be one of those things where this was just a tough matchup for the team, right? Like
Should
you think
also
about.
the other. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we weren't doing a show back then, but remember the Ravens game in 2023
Hmm.
where Lions came in riding high. We're like, wow, this is a great team. Can't believe it. Let's see how we measure up against possibly the best team in the league. The Ravens, they had the one seed in the AFC, I think, that season. They were like 14-3 that year. Um, and a really good team. We went in there, and that was even worse than this game. Like, that was a
Oh yeah.
disaster. And
Hmm.
then as the season went along, it kind of showed no, that didn't necessarily it wasn't necessarily the whole story of that season. The Lions still won the division. They still won two playoff games.
Yeah.
Not going to say what happened after the two playoff games, but they were
Nothing.
good
Nothing.
enough.
I don't think
No,
anything
there was
happened after that.
they never the NFC Championship game was canceled. Actually, there was an earthquake in Santa Clara, and they never played it. But the rest of the season showed they were good enough to be in the Super Bowl that year, or at least had a fighting shot to be. And the Ravens game just kind of was an exception. It just happened. Didn't really mean the rest of the year. I think this game will show some flaws the team has, but I don't
Hmm.
think this is an instantly a bad team because of this one
No.
game.
Well, hey, that's not what Packers fans have been flooding my comments telling me that this is what Lions fans deserve. We were on our high horse thinking that we're like all this and that, and the Lions are going to miss the playoffs, and now we're back to the way things used to be, and everything is right in the world. And yeah, so Packers fans are enjoy this high. We'll see you on Thanksgiving, man. I will say another thing I want to flag. Two more things. One, just another note on the pass rush situation. I don't know about you, but I was Hutch was lined up way out wide, a little too much as well in this game, to the point where after a tight end would chip him, it would take him like 2 seconds just to get to the tackle before he even had a chance to start rushing the passer. And then by that point, like the ball is out before he even really gets into his pass rush moves. Like, and I I don't know. Like, I understand the idea of like wanting to get him a running start or wanting to help him avoid some of those chips a little bit more, but he was just way too wide on some of these plays.
Yeah, that definitely is something to kind of look at. Did they line him up in the middle at all? A little bit, but
No, they had a few. I will say,
there were
Hutch had a
some light
few
there were some light front
stunts.
snaps in the second half where they had like three down linemen, but I
Yeah.
think it was Davenport that might have kicked inside, not Hutch, and I think
Uh,
Muhammad was out there for one of them.
Yeah, Pat O'Connor was lined up at edge as well a few times in this game. And Hutch had a couple stunts where they would try to get him on the guard, but Hutch was like, I don't know if he was just running them poorly, but he got like really slow and stiff on a couple of those that I saw. Like he clearly getting back up to speed a little bit of rust there. But I just want to see him be a little bit closer to the action on some of these. Like let him just go. I know he's gonna get doubled all the time. I know he's gonna get chipped all the time, but he can't be lined up 5 yards away from everything because otherwise he's like just not gonna have any chance at all. And he still had a couple play like there was one where he tried to hit his signature spin move, and Tyleek for some reason decided that he was now an edge rusher and bounced behind Hutchinson, allowing the guard to just kind of help tackle Hutch, which was a bit of a weird play where like Hutch basically spins into being double tackled by the tackle and the guard, which was really funny. And Hutch, I think he only had like two or three pressures in this game. He had like one QB hit, which when the rest of the D line is this inept rushing the passer, gonna need Hutch to be a little bit more involved.
Yeah, there are lessons to be learned. The other thing we should say on the defense, Brian Branch.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that next. I don't know what it is about Lambeau Field, but this dude, like his, I don't know what it goes on with his emotions. He loses his temper every. Last year in Lambeau, there was the ejection on just a really stupid, obvious illegal hit, and this, for those who for somehow didn't see this, on like the first or second series of the game, Brian Branch and Tucker Kraft get into a little, Kraft is blocking him a little aggressively. They get into a shoving match. Somehow Brian Branch ends up with Tucker Kraft's helmet in his hands because I guess he was reaching up there for some reason. And Tucker Kraft pushes him. So Branch throws his helmet like 10 yards away for some reason. I have no idea what was going through his head. Ridiculously stupid by him.
Yeah, and I think it overturned like a run stop. It was like a first down run stop
Yep.
the Lions got, and then
That
all of a
was a
sudden
Tyleek
that's
play.
wiped out. Yeah.
That was a good run stop by Tyleek after Roy Lopez kind of blew up the entire run and made Jacobs cut back into Williams. Like pretty costly.
Yeah, that's really frustrating. But he did have a really great play on an interception that did not stand, unfortunately.
Thanks to
What
two
is your
penalties.
what's your take on the whole situation that unfolded on that play?
So, first of all, that came like I think it was the very next play after Alex Anzalone dropped the easiest interception of his life, where Love just throws it into the breadbasket for Anzalone after Pat O'Connor, I think, got pressure on Love. And so I was already like, oh, we needed that. And then the very next play, Brian Branch, who is for some reason like elite at getting diving interceptions, gets a diving interception, gets up, runs it all the way back for a touchdown. Now, on the run back, there was a flag on Hutchinson for hitting Jordan Love, which I guess he was just a little too far away from the play, and quarterbacks are relatively off limits. I disagree with that notion that that should be illegal because that, like, it's not like it was an illegal hit or anything. He just hits Love clean in the shoulder, but the quarterback is just a big no-no on those plays. But the bigger problem, Rock Ya-Sin gets a holding call against Romeo Doubs, which not only negates the interception and the picks or negates the pick six, but also the interception and gives the Packers a fresh set of downs on third down. So basically everything that could have gone wrong as far as reversing that play went wrong. Not the most egregious penalty, but he is tugging the jersey, and we know the rest, especially in the regular season, are going to look for that. It's one of those plays where obviously I don't like it because if it would have benefited the Lions. But if the roles are reversed and let's say Xavier McKinney gets a pick six and we see on the replay that there was a hold like that against Amon-Ra or something, I would have been livid. So it's one of those where it's like, I don't love it, but if it if it went against the Lions, I would hate it even more if it wasn't called.
Yeah, that was an interesting play because the kind of reaction to the holding from some people is like there wasn't an egregious enough hold to overturn the play that happened. And
You
it would
can't
be
look at it that
great.
way.
It would be great if that was kind of how it worked, that we could just sort of say like, "Oh, this play
Yeah,
is
this
too
was
big,"
cool. So
right? Like
it's like those people who are like, "Oh, it was too cool. Let it stand."
we get the matrix out and like, oh, if the play is how impactful, how cool, how
Yeah.
egregious, and then like we find the spot on the grid and then it determines whether the penalty is enforced. Like it it's just this is a thing the Lions have had an issue with a little bit with obviously Terrion was the grabby guy. Cam Sutton had some issues with that where the Lions just it starts with Yasin grabbing him, and he's in the contact zone, 5 yards, okay, and he just keeps tugging and tugging. Then he lets that part go. Then he kind of gets the left arm around and kind of a little bear hug, and then lets him go. And sometimes you'll get away with it, sometimes you won't. But it's a lot of contact, and you're kind of living dangerously there, and just unfortunate. The thing with the Hutchinson penalty to me, the way that rule should be, because the way I understood it that was being discussed is that if the quarterback's like about to tackle the returner, then you can block him, but you can't if he's like away from the play. But
Hmm.
I think that rule needs to be modified where the quarterback should have two options. After throwing an interception, he can either remain stationary or run off the field. And if he does that, he's off limits. If he runs in the direction of the ball carrier, then he can be blocked. That's how I would do it because you're in Hutchinson's case, you're just trying to block. Here's a guy running at you. He doesn't hit him high or illegally or anything. And like if the quarterback is going to be that off limits, he should wear a non-contact jersey or he should take himself out of the play. But Love is he's running after the ball. Like yes, he's not close to it, but he's trying to be in the play. If you want to be in the play, this is football. You shouldn't get special privileges and want to be in the play. If you don't want to get hit, don't be in the play. And I just don't like that rule. And I understand that they probably fairly assessed it. It's just I think that should be modified a little bit to give the defense more leeway.
See, and it's just that it's not that the call was bad, it's that the rule is bad and flawed because people were bringing up the comparison to the Jared Goff pick six against Washington in the divisional round
Right.
last year, which is some crazy AI generated footage that people made up for that game. I don't know how that happened, but on that play on the run back, Goff runs to the play and gets popped in the head, and there was no call and he had to leave the game for it to be evaluated for a concussion, and people were mad about that. It's like, well, technically that should have been a penalty because he got hit in the head, and that's an illegal hit. But let's say that it was like a hit in the chest, whatever. Then it would have been legal because Goff was close enough to the ball
Yeah.
carrier that it's a block. So it's a very it's. I always hate these kind of subjective, like leave it up to the ref rules because now it like whatever ref crew you get, every ref crew probably could have called that differently, right? Like there's an official crew out there that would have not called the hold and not called that on Hutchinson, right? Like the when we leave so many things up to the officials, there's gonna be some things we disagree with, but also I was laughing because once the game turned on and the first penalty happened, I realized that Clete Blakeman was the referee. And I was just like, no, because we've had so much trauma with Clete in Green Bay, but I digress. Yeah,
Yeah. My final thoughts, two quick things to get on the record about the Tesla interception, not interception,
touchdown.
touchdown. Yeah, we just talking about an interception. Just horrible commentating from Nance
Oh
and
my
Romo
Lord.
on that. Like they show us the clip, you're watching it, you're like, wait a second, did that second
He
heel
goes,
hit?
yeah.
And it's before the rest of the body hits out of bounds. That's a touchdown. And they're looking at it and they're like, yep, didn't get the feet. No, not. I mean, a great catch, but it's not going to stand. And I'm like, what are you doing? Are you watching the play? What? And they went on for like a solid minute. And it wasn't until the referees decided to review it that they were like, wait a second, what do you think, Gene? And Gene is like, that might be a touchdown, guys. And I'm just like, what are they doing? Like, they're too busy to not, to watch the replay. Like,
Well,
that was very
and
far.
The only time they even mentioned the Lions on the broadcast in between plays was at the end of the half when Romo was throwing a tantrum about timeout usage and being like, the Lions should have called a timeout on second down. And it's like, it's 3rd and 1. If the Lions call timeout, there's 50 seconds left. The Packers are going to get a lot more aggressive than just running a direct snap to Josh Jacobs. Like, and with how bad the offense was in the half, like I understand some of the logic, but Romo was throwing a fit over like how bad the Lions were mismanaging the clock. And it's like, dude, that like yeah, for that to be the only time that they talked about the Lions at all, because everything, and I understand that they probably got a bit of a directive like, hey, we got to talk up Green Bay. Hey, Micah Parsons, we got to talk, like this is the big narrative coming down from upstairs, the big bosses at CBS, but just a horrible broadcast experience for a Lions fan. Like I muted them halfway through. I was like, this is horrible.
Yeah, like that was definitely the kind of the counter argument to when NHL fans are always like the NHL is so bad they don't know how to market their players, blah blah blah. And then it's like, well, this is what a lot of leagues do to market their players. Is like we're just going to talk about Micah Parsons throughout the game nonstop, even when like there
He's
were
not on the
plays.
field.
Yeah, when he's not on the field, when he's sitting on the bench. But then like there was that NFL tweet where they tweeted out a video of Micah Parsons being double teamed. It's a 3-man rush.
It's like, yeah, the
Yeah, like that could be Pat O'Connor. He's going to be double teamed. Like that's a 3-man rush. That's kind of how the numbers game works. So that was strange. And there were plays where there was one or two where like a different guy, I don't know if it was Wyatt or someone else, makes like a great play, and then they're still showing Parsons, and I'm like, the different guy made the play. Why do we need to see this?
Well, that was the whole thing on the Evan Williams interception we talked about earlier. It's like Evan
Yeah.
Williams just made an incredible play, and all we're talking about is Micah Parsons. It's like if you're a Green Bay fan, wouldn't I'm surprised that doesn't like I know they're excited about Parsons, but wouldn't that bother you a little bit to be like, dude, our second year safety just made this incredible play that, and we're super excited for him in year two, and you're talking up the wrong guy. Like we want to talk, like yeah, talk up like come on, it's Green Bay, like talk up everyone. It like lean into like glazing the Packers a little bit here. Like we know that they're going to all year because it's Green Bay and they always get talked up because they're always good. But at least talk about like more than just one player because there is a lot more than like Micah Parsons was like 10th on the list of the most impactful players in that game.
Yeah, that was, and if you're a Packers fan, that's a good, like, you should be encouraged that, like, we played a great game and Parsons wasn't even, like, a major factor in it. So,
Yeah.
the other thing I have to say as we close the book on this, Lions fans have taken some punches on the internet over the past 48 hours, you included, unfortunately. Some
Yeah.
Packers fans I hear rated your comment sections on YouTube. Um, that's the way it goes. You know,
Oh
Lions
yeah.
fans did talk some smack over the past couple of years. They had about 50 years worth of pent up waiting to do that. Maybe we got a little over our skis. Now it's coming back. That's how it works.
Yeah.
And the NFC North is easily the most toxic division, I think. Like maybe the AFC North rivals it, but like the Browns are so dormant that I don't know if
Yeah,
it's
but we have
is
the
this.
Bears. Like, I
it's
mean,
the NFC North has the great thing of these teams have all been together for so long. Like you've had a number, like the Seahawks switched from the AFC to the NFC, and you had the Bucks move out of this division to the South, and like I mean the South were put together when they realigned in '02. So other divisions are just kind of put together. The North, as well as I guess the NFC East has been around, like the Cowboys and Giants and Eagles go way back, and Washington, but like the North goes back for 100 years in the case of a number of the teams in the division. Obviously, Chicago, Green Bay, the longest. So it's just so entrenched in us that we are just
mhm.
the most obnoxious fan bases against each other. And right now we're on the losing end. You know what? And that's the way it goes. Nothing wrong with that.
Well, and I should say, like, yeah, Packers fans rated my comment section on YouTube and TikTok, but I like go for it, man. Like, if you want to spew a bunch of toxic BS, go for it. I do not care. Like, I'll respond to the comments that are respectful, and I'll let you guys argue about whatever you want to argue about. Like, there's people arguing about the holding in on the branch pick six still. Like, is what like I don't really care, man. I the reason that I don't care is because I know that if the Lions had won, Lions fans would be doing the same thing to every Packers creator out there. Like that's just kind of the nature of it. Like you can't take these things too seriously. If you're getting bothered by comments on the internet, then you probably shouldn't be on the internet, quite frankly.
Yeah,
Like,
that's a that's a good approach to it, and it was a special week for the NFC North because we were all division matchups this week. So and both were national TV ish games. So
Yeah,
there
game
was
of
a
the week
lot of
versus Monday Night Football. So
right.
and
So
lots of excitement around all these teams too. So
yeah, it was an adventure of a week.
getting into the final segment now as we kind of switch over to NFC North corner and previewing the Bears game. Bears Vikings Monday Night Football was a game. It was not, I kind of felt bad because following up the Bills Ravens game of the year probably in on Sunday Night Football to that was quite the stark contrast, especially in terms of QB play because JJ McCarthy making his first NFL start and he was super bad in the first half and then pretty good in the second half. It was kind of he's a very interesting quarterback to watch because he's kind of got some Jordan Love in him where you have no idea what's going to happen on any given down.
Yeah, he got on that pick six where he threw the out route and left it short. He had one of those against TCU in the Fiesta Bowl in the college football playoff in his sophomore season. That's an image seared into the brain of most Michigan fans. So it was kind of a deja vu PTSD thing when it happened. The first half, he just really his clock was too slow, right? Like that was the big issue is he held onto the ball too long. He knew generally where he wanted to go with it, but just wasn't quick enough. And by the time he pulled the trigger, the route would close or the pressure would get there and he'd get hit. He had what, two or three balls batted down, one knocked like out of his hand as he was throwing. He just wasn't on time. And then he started to be on time in the second half and particularly in that fourth quarter. And he was dynamite in that fourth quarter, made a couple really good throws. He had there was a deep ball on the drive before the touchdown throw to Jefferson. He had two dots just on that drive. And then Kevin O'Connell, beautiful decision to have him pull the ball in the red zone on that one play, runs in for the touchdown, totally had the Bears fooled. That was a good showing from JJ. It took a little bit to get going, but once it clicked, it really clicked. And on the whole, he outplayed Caleb Williams. It was not a great performance from Caleb Williams. He had
Yeah.
a couple moments on the move, but it was not great.
Yeah, and just to kind of, I we'll focus on the Vikings first because the Bears, well, we have to preview more in depth. But I was really impressed by the way Kevin O'Connell handled that game because most coaches get really antsy when their quarterback is not doing well, and Kevin O'Connell didn't waver at all. He kept calling these shots, he kept calling these plays. He said, "You know what? JJ is going to take these hits. He's going to get into the game, and he'll figure it out. And if he doesn't, we'll lose. If he does, we'll win." Honestly kind of like just have like there was something to be said about confidence in quarterbacks and just having the confidence that they'll figure it out. That was such a big thing that we talked about in the preseason with Kyle Allen and Hendon Hooker. Kyle Allen, for all his faults, he just had confidence in himself to rip the ball into some of these windows, and that won him the backup job. Whereas Hendon Hooker always looks skittish. Like obviously a much different conversation when it comes to actual starters, but JJ for he looked a little rattled in the first half. He was getting hit a lot in the first quarter, especially on the first few drives. And then he settled into the game and he started ripping it. There was the one deep throw that drew a pass interference to Aaron Jones, where it's like, you know what? He just had confidence that Jones might have a step, took a shot, and you get the flag for it. He had the touchdown to Jones later in the game. Like that was a great throw as well. I will say I'm very annoyed that the Lions don't get to play JJ very early in the season. This is one where it's like I kind of wish we could have played him like week one and seen if we could have taken advantage there. But he looked good. The Flores defense, Brian Flores finally holds Ben Johnson to under 30 points.
They
Should
didn't.
mention
It
that.
didn't look like they were blitzing as much as they
No,
usually do.
not at all. Like that was such a different it must be like specifically to Ben Johnson because he was so dialed at beating Brian Flores with the Lions over the last few years that Flores just tried something new and man alive, did it ever work. The Vikings defense was doing a fantastic job. The Bears had 17 points on offense. If so,
Yeah, I mean, they basically had two drives. They had the scripted drive at the start, and they had the score effects drive where Vikings are playing off a bit towards the end of the game. And in between that, they didn't do a whole lot. They had a couple drives get into Viking territory, but then stall out. There's one where they go for it on fourth down, which was I was noting the Ben Johnson, Dan Campbell, decision making there on fourth down, and they don't pick it up. And then they have a different one where they kick the field goal and the kicker misses it. And then they had a number of punts in between there, and some of it was really good defense from the Vikings. Other times, Caleb just looked a little uncomfortable and had some open guys and just sailed them. There were people I saw today, like Bears people, devouring the all 22 and how much he missed and blah 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 blah. It sometimes you can get a little. This was an issue with Ohio State fans back in 2023. I remember like the armchair quarterbacking where it's like, oh, if you just watch the all 22, if you were a good quarterback, you would have gone 40 for 40 for 525 yards, right? It's like that's not. But there were definitely, just even watching live, there were open receivers that he's just sailed them. I mean, there was that one to DJ Moore late in the game that was open down the sideline. He just like way overshoots him. And that was pretty hard to watch.
There's one on a fourth down later in the
Yep.
game too, where just has the guy, the read's there, completely misses the throw. Caleb, I think we have to put him in the category of he's an inaccurate quarterback until he proves otherwise, because he has just missed way too many routine throws in his career. Still holds the ball forever, which is a thing that will, and you like as we kind of switch into previewing the Lions Bears game, the Lions are going to blitz a lot more than the Vikings did. And I'm very curious to see how Caleb handles it because Ben Johnson, I think, will have a decent plan for this Lions defense because he knows the principles and the scheme fairly well. It's going to come down to a lot of players just having to win their one-on-ones.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see what the Lions will have for the Bears and how much of a kind of relationship it is between Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson. We haven't seen his relationship with his coordinators yet because there was this thing in college football where uh, Nick Saban, all of his coordinators, he was like for his career, like it was like 22-3 against his former coordinators who became coaches. And it was like a pride of Nick Saban. Like he was just waiting to eviscerate his former coordinators when they went to new teams. And I'm really curious to see. Dan's a competitive guy, so I'm curious to see how they will approach this game. But I want to know before we kind of get into personnel, there were a lot of Bears fans talking about how that game didn't seem like different from the Eberflus experience in terms of game management, game theory, and some curious decisions were made in that game. The timeout on the 2nd and 1 or 3rd and 1 was weird. I didn't understand why they didn't just wait till they got the first down to use the timeout. And then the fiasco with the kicker and not kicking it out the back of the end zone or just kicking it out of bounds. If the kicker doesn't have the leg to boot it out the back, just put that thing out of bounds. I mean, that was a brutal mistake.
Or even just
Like,
short, because you're not allowed to kick it before the 30-yard line anymore. So you could literally just squib kick that thing and take the penalties. Well, I do think that one's more on the kicker. Like Ben Johnson came out afterwards, like the plan was to kick it out of bounds. He didn't. Oh well. Like I know people were kind of questioning why you wouldn't like first of all, getting into a situation where you only have one timeout and you have to get the ball back, that's also kind of in like you can't end up in those situations. In the second half, you gotta do a better job managing your timeouts. But also, I just question like at that point, just go for the onside kick. You have one timeout, and it's the 2 minute. It's like 2 seconds before the 2 minute warning. It's a difference like of 20 yards, yeah, but you gotta just try. I feel like to get the ball back in any way you can, and I don't know. I question that a lot from Ben Johnson.
yeah, it was kind of a lights are too bright moment for Ben in that first game. But we'll see how he settles into the job of being a head coach.
I will say well, I mean, I know we joked about like, hey, we like rocket scientist, super smart coach. That sounds a lot like someone that we knew, even though Ben Johnson obviously had a better track record. I will say though, for as horrible as he was, Matt Patricia did beat the Patriots in week 3 as his first win as a head coach. I'm just saying.
That was the best game Matt Patricia ever coached, I think. Like
Yeah.
the defense was unreal in that game and that was the game that that
Carry
was the
on.
one Yeah, they broke the 100 yards drought. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a Sunday night game too, and the crowd was roaring. That was after that first game against the Jets. It was almost like I'm out on this coach before it starts. And then
We were
that
in
game,
for one play. That was the
you're
Quandre Diggs pick six on the first play of the season. And then immediately and then Sam Darnold proceeded to tune them up for like 48 points.
yeah, and then you get to week 3 and they beat the Pats, and you're kind of like, oh, maybe Patricia does have it, and then no, he did not. But it was a fun night at least.
But yeah, I bring that up to be like, well, that's what I'm scared of. Is like maybe Ben Johnson knows this team a little too well and knows exactly how to scheme for them and game plan for them. So that's gonna be interesting. I do think that I will like I know Caleb and DJ Moore both got tuned up on one of the last plays of the game where they both like crazy double assassination by the Vikings on that play where Ivan Pace just gets a free shot on Caleb and then DJ Moore gets demolished in the secondary. So they might be a little banged up on offense going into this one. Romo Dunze though is still pretty good. And I do think that the Bears offensive line is fine. I wouldn't say good. They're fine. They're all right. They do some things.
I didn't think it was bad, particularly last night. I mean, they invested money in it again this offseason, signing Joe Tooney, did they sign a center as well along
Yeah,
with
Drew
him?
Dahlman from the Falcons.
Right. So they've put a lot of resources into this unit, but it hasn't really changed the fact that Caleb holds the ball forever. That
Yeah.
that remains a big question, and I think going into this game, we know how much Dan Campbell prioritizes takeaways with his defense, and they didn't get one that stood in the first game. I think they're going to be hungry to try and coax a mistake out of Caleb Williams here.
Yeah. And um do want to mention with Caleb, he was doing a fantastic job evading pressure. For all his faults holding the ball too long, especially in that first half, he was
Yeah.
dancing around in the pocket. He was extending plays. He was making things happen with his feet. He wouldn't always follow up with his arm, but he was at least getting himself into positions to make big plays. I know we've talked about his problems with playing hero ball too much, but he's got there's something to be said about his ability to extend plays that will have to be like, the Lions are going to have to be aware of it. I don't know if they're going to be a little more cautious rushing the passer and try to just kind of do that soft contain, or if they're going to get super aggressive and be like, hey, he holds the ball, let's take advantage and get him on the ground. Going to be interesting to see what Shepard dials up.
Yeah, coming out of that game against the Vikings, I definitely felt like Caleb Williams on the move is like my biggest concern in the pass game. Breaking contain and making some things happen. We know Lions have had some issues with mobile quarterbacks over the years. That's something to watch because I thought that first drive, when of course all of the Ben Johnson fanboys immediately start going crazy online about, oh my God, like the Bears under Ben Johnson and on and on and on. I found it really funny that the drive that he gets his first touchdown as the Bears head coach on looks nothing like a single drive he had in Detroit with Jared Goff because it was all Caleb breaking the pocket and made some really nice plays on the move. And he had that one that was like kind of seemingly improvised where he like threw it across to Swift.
Mhm.
Where I don't even know if Swift was supposed to be a receiver on that play. He just kind of made it happen, and he had that one rolling out and hitting a Dunce on the sideline. So it was really that was really impressive. And then it kind of went away, and to some degree, you might just want to keep him in the pocket. And
Yeah. I think my fear is the best Caleb looked in his rookie season was that second half on Thanksgiving against Detroit. So
yeah,
there's a little fear factor. I do want to shout out though Brett Coleman on Twitter because I was laughing at this. Like you mentioned, all the Ben Johnson fanboys. He tweeted out after the first drive, "This is like an entirely different sport than the people of Chicago have ever seen before." And then like 2 hours later, he's like, "Never mind, still exactly the same sport."
it like kind of showcases to me how much like ball knowledge has degraded that like we've gone from taking a victory lap after week 1 to taking a victory lap after
After
like
one drive.
drive. Yeah, or in the case because there was all the people out there like ready to dunk on JJ, right? And like there was
They
the
were.
memes of yeah,
And they
there were
were.
there were all these memes about like, oh, they built this great team and then they messed it up by draft blowing a pick on McCarthy, blah blah blah. And it's just like chill, people. Like it's one, not let alone one game, one half, one quarter, one drive. Like just settle down. We don't. Not everything needs to be
Anything
part of the
anything
agenda
to
right
feel
away.
vindicated. Anything that will make me feel good about the things I said. That's all that matters is proving that I was right. That's all we care about nowadays is how can I prove myself right as quickly as possible without any context. Yeah.
Yeah. So it one last thing before we wrap it up. The Ravens should have gone for it on the fourth down, right?
They should have done a lot of things. I blowing a 15-point lead, give it and like to go further, giving up three scoring drives in the final 3 minutes is very impressive. And also, you want to talk about the fourth down. How about Jair Alexander tackling Keon Coleman when he should have just let him score? I do love that we've now entered a spot with Jair where everyone is like, this is the fate, like this is the most reputation corner ever. This dude sucks. This dude's the worst. It was very funny. But yeah, the Ravens, um, I have no words to explain what happened at the end of that game. It kind of seems like Josh Allen just manifested magic, honestly.
It was a remarkable game, but I just thought in that fourth down at the end, they had to go for it. Like I
The only
just
thing I do understand because if you don't get it, you lose because you would have given like the Bills
but
would be in
they had
field
time
goal
they had
range.
timeouts though at the time. They had timeouts to potentially allow the field goal and get it back, which I think is the argument for going for it. I also just felt that it's 4th and 2. You have Lamar Jackson. You have so many ways you can hurt
Derrick
them
Henry
with
was going crazy too.
and this sort of game is the big thing, right? Like we talk about these situations, like my desire to always have the ball last comes from watching so many of these Lion games of the past where they were high scoring and you're playing Aaron Rodgers and you just never wanted to get burned late. Like,
Or
if
Matt
you're playing,
Flynn.
if you're if the other team you're playing is starting, David Blau, then like, okay, trust your defense. But there was no defense this whole game, and the idea of just trusting your defense there was crazy to me, to get you the stop. So
The worst
that
thing that
was,
happened to the Ravens in that game was the Bills not getting the 2 point conversion to keep it a
yeah,
2 point lead. If the Bills get that there, the Ravens would have been aggressive on offense and they would have gone down and they would have got a field goal. Like I fully believe that. The second that the Bills didn't get it, I'm like, oh, the Bills might win actually because now they can get the ball back.
yeah. I don't think that's crazy.
It was but just all the vibes in that last 3 minutes was absolutely insane. Like you get the touchdown, cool. You're down by 8, and then Derrick Henry with I've never seen Derrick Henry fumble like that in a long time. Like he doesn't fumble the ball very often at all. He definitely doesn't fumble it on just a regular strip by Ed Oliver, who, by the way, Ed Oliver was unbelievable in that game. He was the only person that could stop Derrick Henry in that game. Derrick Henry had like 15 carries for 175 yards or something. And the only times he didn't have like a 20-yard game is when Ed Oliver was the one in his way. Like, what a game by him.
Yeah, that was one of those games that will go down for a long time on national TV. Kind of like remember the one when Goff was with the Rams
Rams,
against
Chiefs, yeah.
the Chiefs, yeah, the Monday night game. That was an all timer.
Yeah. So, unbelievable start to week one on that front. Obviously not for the Lions, but eh, is what it is. We'll see what happens on Sunday. Hopefully the Lions can get in the win column in their home opener. I think that's where we're going to wrap this episode. Again, sorry that we didn't get an episode out last week. Hopefully it won't happen again. First time we've had difficulties like that. So we'll check back in after the Bears game, after hopefully a Lions win. So if you made it this far, make sure to hit like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. If you are listening on podcasting platforms, make sure to hit follow and leave us a review. You can find the show on Twitter at Payne and Drain. You can find me at ZachPayne41, Alex at Alex_Drain. We'll see you guys next time. Cheers.